Okay, let's just jump right in. We are doing a deep dive today into a story that it really starts with the ultimate fantasy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
The perfect solution, a way to clean up all of humanity's mess. I mean, just imagine a place, a single point on a map that promises to take everything you want gone. Your industrial waste, your environmental guilt, even your most damaging secrets, and just makes it all permanently, irreversibly vanish.
And that very premise, that idea of permanent, irreversible disposal, I
Hmm.
mean, that carries such an immense weight of potential failure. It's a promise that really flies in the face of, the basic laws of physics.
Right.
So this deep dive, it focuses intensely on one location,
Hmm.
a mysterious geological fissure in a small mountain village we only know as village name. And it is, I think, maybe the definitive modern case study in what happens when corporate hubris, just blinded by the sheer convenience of a solution, collides head-on with geology,
Oh.
with chaos.
And we're tracing a horrifyingly rapid sequence of events here. We're talking about a span of roughly 5 years. And in that time, this this anomaly, it goes from being an enigmatic local curiosity to the bedrock of a national waste strategy.
And then a full-blown national security crisis.
Exactly.
Right.
So our mission today is to dissect the source material we have in front of us, this incredible stack of documents, to really understand how the public narrative, the one so carefully crafted by Alternative Disposal Solutions, or ADS,
Right.
how that led directly to the cold catastrophic reality that's detailed in this highly confidential government memo from just 5 years later.
We're really looking at the difference between spin and science here, between that promise of permanent disposal and the shocking, disruptive reality of unpredictable reemergence. We have to analyze every single step in that 5-year journey,
Yeah.
because every single one, from the community buy-in to the regulatory oversight, it all hinged on one single fatal assumption.
That what goes down stays down.
Precisely. So let's go back to the beginning, to the moment the Earth first opened up.
So the genesis of this entire saga, it's just steeped in irony. It links a natural disaster, spirituality, geology. It all starts, really, by accident, in village name after Typhoon number 11.
And this wasn't just any storm.
No, this was a storm of historic proportions, and its power was such that it didn't just cause, flooding or wind damage. It triggered a massive landslide at the mountain foothills. And our first document notes that the slide didn't just expose bare earth, it completely destroyed a centuries-old Shinto shrine.
Which had been in that exact spot for generations.
Yeah, generations. So right away, you have this heavy thematic element. The destruction of a spiritual safeguard immediately exposes this profound physical anomaly.
Yeah. And when that earth was stripped away, it revealed the fissure. And at first glance, it was just a hole about a meter in diameter. But the villagers, they instantly recognized it as something fundamentally wrong.
Their initial descriptions in the source material, they're actually chilling. They talk about peering into a profound darkness that seemed to have no end. It sounds almost mythical, but the initial tests quickly proved that the physical reality was, well, it was far more bizarre than any myth.
And that first test was purely anecdotal, but it's so significant. A young man, defying the warnings from the village elders about bringing down a curse.
Of course.
He drops a simple pebble into the opening,
Yeah.
and the result, or really the lack of a result, immediately defined the problem.
No sound.
Just absolute silence. No thump, no splash, no clatter of it hitting the sides. For anyone standing there, that is where the terror truly begins. It wasn't just deep, it felt, to them, apparently boundless.
Which is when the scientific attempts to measure that boundlessness begin,
Hmm.
and they were even more frustrating. They bring in this geophysicist, Dr. Akira Inoue, and his team's first approach is, dead simple mechanics. A long, durable cord with a weighted end. They start paying it out, trying to plumb the depth. They get to the end of their equipment, the entire spool is paid out, and still, the weighted end never registered a bottom.
You have to think about the implication of that for a moment. They literally ran out of rope before the hole ran out of depth.
Yeah.
But the detail that truly elevates this from just a deep hole to a genuine geological anomaly is what happened when they tried to retrieve the cord. Dr. Inu recorded that the line snapped cleanly at the rim.
Not frayed from rubbing against rock.
No, not frayed at all. He described it as if sheared off. It suggests something instantaneous and precise was happening right at that threshold, right where the rope crossed into the darkness.
You just have to picture Inui and his team standing there looking at this clean cut on an industrial-grade rope, just baffled. So he moves on to acoustic testing, tries to force an answer using physics. He uses a high-powered bullhorn, a device specifically designed to project sound for dozens of kilometers. and he directs it right down into the fissure. And what does he get?
Again, nothing. Absolutely nothing. The source material uses this really vivid phrase, "The sound was swallowed whole."
And that's critical because most deep geological features, caves, sinkholes, vents, they reflect sound waves back, even if it's delayed.
Right, you'd expect some kind of echo.
But this one didn't. It just consumed the energy entirely.
So Inui's initial conclusion, which is based on repeated scientific failure, is that this thing, it didn't behave like any known geological formation. It wasn't a standard sinkhole, which you get when bedrock dissolves.
Right, not a volcanic vent, not a karst feature.
Exactly, which is the most common kind of deep vertical hole.
Right.
Those all have identifiable characteristics, they have measurable depths, and they certainly reflect sound. This defied every category.
So his professional recommendation was clear and, frankly, very cautious. Secure the area, recognize that this is a profound risk, and consider filling it immediately for public safety.
But that's where the private sector and the immense pull of convenience intervened and really changed the fate of the entire nation.
Right on cue. A private businessman arrives. He's representing this yet-to-be-formed company, Eterna Disposal Solutions, ADS, and he doesn't show up with heavy machinery to fill the hole.
No, he arrives with a ledger and a promise.
The deal he offered was simple. ADS would assume all responsibility for the hole, ensuring its safe filling and management, and in exchange, they just wanted the land rights.
But the brilliance, and you could say the moral failure of the ADS strategy was recognizing they couldn't just take the land. They had to buy the community's silence, their complicity even. They realized the typhoon had taken something vital from village name, the shrine, the infrastructure, and they could position this hole as the source of renewed prosperity.
And they delivered in two major, highly visible ways. This is all documented right here. First, addressing that spiritual loss, ADS funded the construction of a beautiful new Shinto shrine built on higher, safer ground, along with a modern community meeting hall.
And this was dedicated during the Autumn Festival. A huge symbolic gesture. It's reframing the narrative from the community being cursed to being blessed by this geological event.
But maybe even more importantly, from a practical standpoint, they addressed the economic need. They financed a huge infrastructure project, a new paved roadway connecting the village directly to the national highway.
And that one project, it dramatically reduced transit times, opened up economic opportunities. It basically linked a previously isolated community to the entire national supply chain. The source material even notes this was infrastructure beyond their dreams.
Mayor Yoshiro Kobayashi's public statement just perfectly captures this ethical trade-off. He called the partnership a blessing that provided facilities and infrastructure the community could never have afforded on its own. So the whole, this scientifically terrifying bottomless anomaly, was successfully reframed.
It was no longer a profound danger.
It was the engine of local wealth and convenience, and once you have that local buy-in, you're free to scale the convenience to a national level.
And scale they did,
Eh.
with terrifying speed.
So that transition from a local anomaly to a national paradigm shift is detailed right here in Document 2, which is an ADS corporate press release. Once the village was secure, ADS moved so fast to get national contracts, creating this compelling public narrative that it papered over all of Dr. Inu's failed tests.
And the official justification was so slick, so scientific sounding. ADS claimed that their own subsequent independent analysis, the source of which is, let's say, suspiciously vague, had confirmed the fissure extended to a depth in excess of 5,000 meters.
That 5,000-meter figure was key.
It was everything. It sounded definitive, it sounded safe, and it earned them the trust of regulators who were desperate for a solution.
But the irony, which we can only really grasp now, is that they used a definitive number, 5,000 meters, but described something that just a few years earlier refused to be measured at all. It was corporate comfort food for regulators. And their CEO, Kaito Tanaka, he understood the optics perfectly. He didn't frame this as a garbage business. He framed it as environmental salvation. His mission, he claimed, was not just managing waste, but returning it to the earth in the most secure manner conceivable.
They guaranteed zero risk.
Zero risk, and a disposal method that was passive and irreversible. This promise of finality, of just being done with the problem, secured immediate regulatory commendation.
But what ADS was truly selling was psychological relief, wasn't it? The relief of disappearing consequences. Tanaka's quote here is incredibly revealing. They were offering a mechanism for progress to continue without the burden of perpetual storage liabilities.
They were offering industry and government the ultimate eraser.
For their environmental and ethical consequences, it was a solution to human guilt, not just human garbage. And the nation took that offer immediately. Document 3, which is an investigative feature, details this staggering expansion. In just over 2 years, the whole became the nation's favorite secret, accepting materials that went far, far beyond the initial mandate of low-level radioactive waste.
Okay, let's look at this inventory of outsourced guilt, because the sheer scale and variety of what they were throwing in there tells you exactly what kind of problems people wanted to just make vanish. It started with nuclear material,
Right.
but it quickly moved to highly sensitive biological matter.
Yes, specifically contaminated biological matter. We're talking about the incinerated remains of animal subjects from contagious disease experiments at university research hospitals.
So this is a huge public health concern they're solving.
An immediate volatile one. When you have highly infectious samples, dealing with their permanent destruction is costly and it's hazardous. Here, they could just ship the remains and forget about them.
And then human remains.
Yes. The logistical and ethical dilemma of paupers' graves, unclaimed bodies from city morgues. It was just solved. Instead of maintaining vast cemeteries or complex systems for the forgotten, they were simply deposited. The whole was solving bureaucratic nightmares tied to mortality itself.
But maybe the most insidious, in terms of state security and historical integrity, was the influx of classified government documents.
The foreign defense ministries established regular disposal schedules. The report notes that officials treated the destruction of history with banality. They were casually tossing entire binders of highly sensitive papers down the chute while chatting about their weekend plans.
Just think about that for a second. That moral erosion, state secrets, diplomatic communications, vital intelligence, all being destroyed not by high security shredders, but by the casual certainty of out of sight, out of mind.
And law enforcement and the judicial branches followed right behind them. Police forces used the whole to destroy huge stockpiles of counterfeit currency, which is a big logistical burden.
And
More critically, it became an invaluable tool for making criminal evidence vanish. Compromising materials, evidence in sensitive investigations. If you needed it gone forever, the whole was the answer.
And it wasn't just the state, was it? The whole became a mechanism for personal historical erasure.
That's right. Private individuals, firms, they used it to get rid of compromising materials, old love letters, sensitive diaries, anything that could potentially ruin a reputation or expose a secret. The system offered a permanent, physical delete button for your past.
And finally, just the sheer volume of municipal solid waste. I mean, the grand plan that's outlined here in Document 3 was to lay a massive pipeline to divert all of the city's household garbage from these overwhelmed oceanic dump sites directly into the fissure.
The whole was meant to swallow the literal material consequence of high-volume urban life.
This expansion, it just highlights the intense sociological impact. There's a sociologist cited in Document 3, Dr. Mari Watanabe, and she captured the core problem immediately. She argued the whole provided an illusion of infinite capacity, and in doing so, it swallowed not just garbage.
But accountability.
Exactly.
Accountability.
She coined the phrase that really defines this entire operation. We were outsourcing our guilt. The public, the government, they were relieved of the cognitive burden of consequence. They no longer had to worry about where the waste went or how it impacted future generations. And the result? A society focused more intensely on consumption, convinced that the consequences had been permanently neutralized.
And here's the kicker. The statistics backed up the narrative, for a while at least.
Right.
Because they stopped these massive incineration projects and oceanic dumping, environmental metrics temporarily improved. The sea was clearer, the air felt cleaner, and this perceived environmental success, it just justified the operation in the eyes of the public and the regulators.
It was a vicious cycle. Convenience feeding corporate justification?
But the entire system, the whole thing, rested on this foundation of profound, unsettling unknowns. They had chosen to ignore the scientific reality that they couldn't find the bottom in favor of immediate convenience.
They were counting on the unknown staying unknown. And that convenience, that blissful ignorance is about to be shattered completely. 50 kilometers away by a 5-year delayed echo.
So we fast forward. It's approximately 5 years from the beginning of ADS operations. The whole is just humming along, silently absorbing the nation's problems. ADS is a huge success story. Then, August 17th, 20XX plus 5, the illusion breaks. And it breaks in the most improbable way possible, 50 kilometers away from the disposal site near village name.
The scene is Orion Tower, a massive 50-story skyscraper under construction right in the heart of the city center. This is a scene of industrial noise, urban density. It's as far as you can get from the quiet mountain foothills. And our witness is a man named Kenji Tanaka, a 34-year-old steelworker.
And Tanaka was just taking a routine break, enjoying a moment of solitude on a steel girder on the 38th floor. The source material is very specific about this detail. The sky was perfectly clear.
No clouds, no storm.
No apparent source for what happened next.
And that's when he heard it. A clear, distant voice that seemed to shout down at him from the open sky, far above his 38th floor vantage point. And it wasn't the sound of a plane or a loudspeaker, it was distinctly human. The phrase he heard, which is documented and becomes critical evidence, was, "Hey, come on out!"
And he immediately scans the area. No aircraft, no drones, no one else on a higher girder. For a moment, he thinks it must have been fatigue or maybe the wind playing tricks. It's the kind of isolated acoustic event that makes you doubt your own senses.
Right, but that auditory phenomenon was instantly confirmed by physical evidence. Moments after the shout faded, a small, dark pebble skimmed past his shoulder and plummeted toward the ground. He realized pretty quickly it wasn't construction debris. There was no work happening above him.
And it certainly didn't fall out of his pocket given the angle of descent.
Exactly. So the initial response from foremen and safety officers was just pure bewilderment. They do site sweeps, they review footage, they roll out pranks or internal site malfunctions. Meanwhile, the ADS spokesperson, in response to early media inquiries, just declines to comment.
Standard line. Unwavering commitment to high safety standards. The corporate spin was still active, but the physics of reality were demanding attention.
And this pebble and this phantom shout, they trigger a high-level confidential investigation. And this is where Document 5 comes in. This is the memorandum drafted by Dr. Haruka Sato of the Geological and Hazard Assessment Division, and it's sent directly to the National Security Council and other key regulatory bodies. This memo is the smoking gun.
Dr. Sato's team recovers the pebble and immediately starts analysis. The results were conclusive. Petrographic and geochemical analysis confirmed the pebble was chemically and structurally identical to basaltic rock samples taken specifically from the landslide area where the hole was first exposed.
Okay, so that proves the provenance. The pebble had been introduced to the disposal site's environment and had now returned. But the truly devastating connection was the voice. Dr. Sato noted this profound correlation. The shouted phrase Kenji Tanaka heard, "Hey, come on out!"
It corresponded exactly to words uttered into the hole by villagers during its initial discovery 5 years earlier. This changes everything. It means the hole is not a boundless sink. It's acting as a massive geological time delay mechanism. The materials and the energy, in this case acoustic energy, that were put in 5 years ago are now being re-emitted into the atmosphere. This is not just an echo. It's a profound temporal displacement. It's showing that material takes roughly half a decade to cycle through and return.
But the displacement isn't just temporal, it's spatial, which is what fundamentally breaks what we know about physics and geology. Document 5 highlights the critical findings. The reemergence happened 50 kilometers away from the disposal site and, critically, 38 stories high.
And this is where Dr. Sato's memo becomes truly alarming. She concluded that the fissure could not be a simple vertical shaft, no matter how deep. It has to involve, in her words, complex topological or dimensional properties. We're not talking about a cave or a pit anymore. We are talking about something that acts as a conduit, capable of projecting materials and energy into the environment at random points in both space and time.
We have to slow down here and just recognize the implications of the physics of this. For the material to reappear 50 kilometers away and at that altitude, it means the hole is bypassing the entire concept of geological containment. It's a fundamental violation of the distance constraint. It suggests the conduit must be nonlinear. A topological shortcut, like she implies.
It's not just defying geological classification anymore.
No, it's defying the rules of the environment we live in.
Exactly. There's another expert quoted in the breaking news report, a Dr. Emily Chen, who said early on that if we adhere to the conservation of mass and energy, re-entry isn't implausible. But the specifics of this re-entry, the 50-kilometer distance and the 38-story height, they validate Dr. Sato's terrifying conclusion. The material didn't come out of the ground nearby, it was projected into the sky miles away.
And if a 5-year-old pebble and a casual shout can return with that kind of spatial and temporal chaos, the question instantly becomes, what else? What else out of the 5 years of outsourced guilt is currently cycling back toward our urban centers?
Dr. Sato's confidential memorandum. It immediately pivots from scientific analysis to an urgent assessment of catastrophic hazard. The systemic failure identified by the Orion Tower incident meant that this national convenience had instantly mutated into a multi-layered national crisis. The memo outlines 4 immediate and severe risks.
Let's start with the obvious one, the one that justified the initial contracts in the first place. The radioactive hazard. ADS was accepting low-level radioactive waste and potentially intermediate-level wastes. If this material returns uncontrolled, not in a containment facility, but projected randomly into the atmosphere above a city, the consequences are immediate, and they are disastrous.
We're talking about the uncontrolled dispersal of radionuclides in densely populated urban areas. And radionuclides are simply atoms that emit ionizing radiation. If these materials, which have been mixed with organic and biological matter in the disposal process, resurface, they could contaminate vast swaths of the city. It would require immediate, massive, and incredibly costly decontamination and likely evacuation.
And the time delay means that today's threat isn't yesterday's waste.
No. It's the worst of the waste that was deposited 5 years ago, which is likely already making its return journey.
Then you have the biological and chemical contamination risks. Remember the contaminated biological matter, the incinerated remains from those highly contagious disease experiments. If those pathogens or chemical agents resurface, the material could easily be picked up by wind currents or deposited in water supplies.
It's a public health nightmare. The very materials that were used to research and control disease outbreaks, intended to be erased permanently, could now trigger one. The resurgence of complex organic waste and potential pathogens into populated regions is an existential threat far exceeding a typical toxic waste spill.
And the government's own complicity comes back to haunt them with the third risk, the compromise of classified information.
Right. The foreign and defense ministries had been treating the whole as the ultimate paper shredder for 5 years. ADS had become the custodian of state secrets.
So if those documents, state secrets, diplomatic materials, evidence from ongoing legal cases, if they start to reappear randomly, maybe blowing through a public park, picked up by a local news crew, the damage to national security is incalculable.
It instantly nullifies years of intelligence work. It destroys global diplomatic trust. The casual banality of the destruction of history suddenly becomes the active, chaotic exposure of history.
And finally, the societal and economic impact. Dr. Sato recognized that if these events continued, public trust would completely collapse. The infrastructure benefits ADS provided, the new shrine, the paved road, the temporarily clean seas, they would be completely nullified.
The societal consequences would include widespread panic, massive litigation against both ADS and the regulatory bodies, and severe disruption of essential services. The perception of risk would shift from minimal to infinite, rendering entire districts potentially uninhabitable out of fear, even if the contamination levels were low.
So the payment for the convenience of those 5 years would now be due, in chaos and collapse.
Given the severity, Dr. Sato didn't delay in providing urgent recommendations. They were immediate. They were non-negotiable. First, an immediate suspension of all disposal activities.
Stop feeding the topological monster.
Exactly. Not just nuclear waste, but biological materials, garbage shipments, everything pending a full, immediate investigation.
And second, a comprehensive audit.
Right. This required forming an interdisciplinary task force, geologists, physicists, security experts, to assess the fissure using every advanced technology available. We're talking radar, seismic monitoring, drones. But crucially, the mandate was to audit historical records to inventory everything that had been put in there over the past 5 years.
That inventory is essentially a manifest for disaster. They need to know exactly what highly sensitive, highly dangerous material is currently cycling through the system and preparing to return. It's an urgent hunt for the most dangerous ticking time bombs.
And third, contingency planning. Dr. Sato mandated the immediate update of emergency response protocols for hazardous material incidents and preparation for large-scale evacuation and decontamination procedures in urban areas. This is the moment the government officially recognized they weren't dealing with a stable disposal site, but an unpredictable, hostile phenomenon.
And fourth, a regulatory review. This entire disaster stemmed from regulatory bodies allowing the operation to proceed despite Dr. Anu's initial failure to measure a bottom or an echo.
They prioritized the pragmatic solution over scientific certainty.
And now they were paying the price. The entire permitting process for deep hole disposal had to be reevaluated to prevent this from ever happening again.
The final assessment in Document 5, it serves as the crushing conclusion to our deep dive. Dr. Sato flatly cited the Ariel incident as the first documented instance of a systemic failure in the ADS disposal model.
And she identified the fatal assumption that underpinned the entire profitable and convenient operation. That principle of out of sight, out of mind was now definitively confirmed as fundamentally flawed.
The whole, once perceived by the corporation and the nation as a limitless sink, was now concluded to be nothing more than a temporary holding zone with unpredictable output mechanisms. It didn't solve their problems, it simply created a time-delayed, geographically randomized version of them.
The nation outsourced its accountability to an enigma.
And the enigma responded by outsourcing its dangerous contents back to the nation, ignoring all constraints of time, distance, and altitude.
It's just a devastating breakdown of faith and permanence. The moment the corporation chose convenience over containment, they signed a 5-year delay contract on their own destruction.
This deep dive has shown us an extraordinary narrative arc. The story of an anomaly in village name, exposed by natural forces, rapidly leveraged into a national solution by corporate promises.
And community benefits.
And community benefits, only to crash because a tiny pebble and a 5-year-old voice reappeared 50 kilometers away.
The lesson we extract from this source material is so clear and so immediate. The danger of relying on convenience over containment when you're dealing with complex problems. The entire ADS model was based on erasing the physical existence of consequence. But this reemergence with such drastic spatial and temporal displacement, it forces us to fundamentally question the very definition of disposal.
And if the concept of containment is broken, if permanence is revealed to be just an illusion of time and distance, what does that mean for any human endeavor that relies on locking away consequences? The physical reality is terrifying, but the implications for governance, for history, for consumption, they're profound.
We outsourced our accountability into a dark hole that promised infinite capacity and permanent erasure. And that hole has now demonstrated that its capacity is limited, its time is delayed, and its output is chaotic.
Which really raises an important, provocative question for you, the listener. If this principle of delayed, randomized return applies even to non-physical things like national debt or collective historical guilt or environmental consequences we've deferred through technological assumptions, what is currently being deposited into the holes of modern society? Are we relying on rapid digitization or deep-sea exploration or long-term climate strategies to defer consequences that might just reemerge years from now, 50 kilometers from where we expect them? What is the real cost of convenience when permanence is just a polite lie?
Something to mull over the next time you think a problem has simply vanished.